Welcome to Movie Bites. Today we're taking a trip back to 1995 to revisit Clockers, a gritty crime drama directed by Spike Lee. This film gives us an unflinching look at the harsh realities of life in the projects, focusing on the moral dilemmas faced by a young drug dealer and a weary detective. Starring Mekhi Phifer, Harvey Keitels, and Delroy Lindo, Clockers stands out for its powerful performances and its raw portrayal of the choices that define a person's life. We'll dive into the real names and ages of the cast members, exploring how their careers have evolved since their time in the spotlight. First up, we have Strike, played by Mekhi Phifer in his debut role. Strike, real name Ronald, is a young man from the Nelson Mandela projects, caught up in the fast-paced world of street hustling. He worked as a clocker for Rodney, and for those unfamiliar, a clocker is someone who deals drugs, posted on the benches day in and day out, making those hand-to-hand plays. But Strike wasn't content with being just another bench warmer. He had ambition. He wanted to level up, move major weight, and get to the status of someone like Daryl Adams, who we'll get to later. Now, what made Strike stand out wasn't just his hunger for more, it was his complexity. Sure, he was caught in the game, but he had this soft side that would peek through. The man loved trains. That little obsession with watching trains roll by, it gave him peace. It showed that he still had a sense of wonder, something untouched by the streets. It reminded you that Strike wasn't all the way gone. He still had something to hold on to. Let's talk about that chocolate moo. Strike was always sipping on that stuff, but it was tearing him up inside. He had constant stomach pain, probably ulcers or something worse, and you could just see his health deteriorate as the film went on. It was hard to watch sometimes. He looked like he was fighting a war in his own body. You start to feel bad for him because it wasn't just the streets that were eating him alive, it was everything. Mekhi Phifer was just 21 at the time, but he brought real weight to the role, and Clockers kicked off a major career. He went on to star in Soul Food, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, Shaft, Paid in Full, 8 Mile, and that's just scratching the surface. On TV, he became a fan favorite on ER as Dr. Pratt, and popped up in shows like Lie to Me. Now 50, Mekhi is still out here thriving. But no matter how far he's come, to fans of Clockers, he'll always be Strike, the young man chasing something more, while quietly battling demons of his own. Up next, we have Rodney, portrayed by the always commanding Delroy Lindo. Rodney was no ordinary street dealer. He was slick, manipulative, and had been through the system before. A seasoned hustler who knew how to move in silence, Rodney had Strike working under him as a clocker, pushing dope out on the benches. But Rodney wasn't just hustling in the open. He had a clever setup, a candy store called Rodney's Store, that doubled as a cover for his operation. Kids would roll in to buy snacks or play arcade games, totally unaware, or maybe just pretending not to notice what else was going down behind the scenes. Rodney had this smooth way of pulling you in. He'd tell the young ones they could make real money if they worked for him, dangling that dream of fast cash and a better life. But behind all that charm was someone who didn't mind using people to get what he wanted. Still, every now and then, he'd drop some real-world gems that made you think, damn, he's dirty, but he's got wisdom. When Strike told him he wanted to move up from the benches to working inside the store, Rodney didn't just hand him the keys, he gave him a test. That test? Handle Daryl Adams, one of Rodney's own who had started dodging him. And let's be real. When drug dealers get crossed, they're not filing police reports. They handle things on their own. Delroy Lindo was 43 at the time and already a well-respected actor with a strong resume. He'd been in films like The Hard Way, Malcolm X, and Crooklyn, and his performance in Clockers just added to his legacy. Now 72, Delroy Lindo is still going strong. He's won several awards and continues to shine in Hollywood with the same fire and presence he's always had. Whether he's playing a hero or a villain, Delroy always delivers. Let's talk about Daryl Adams, a man whose smile shined brighter than Rihanna's diamonds. Honestly, Rihanna might get jealous seeing this dude light up a room with just his grin. But that same $1 million smile? It didn't protect him from a fate that was darker than midnight in the projects. Daryl Adams was played flawlessly by Steve White. Daryl worked at Ahab's food joint, flipping burgers by day, but behind that deep fryer, he was flipping something else entirely. He was one of Rodney's guys, moving dope and using his job as a clever cover-up. But Daryl had started dodging Rodney, left, right, and center. And in the drug game, when you start disappearing with product or money, your boss doesn't just send you a warning text. Rodney was over it. He labeled Daryl a thief, straight up, and said he got to be got. So who gets handed the dirty job? You guessed it, Strike. And just like that, Daryl's fate is sealed. His murder is the match that lights the fuse for everything that follows. A police investigation, interrogations, lies, and the crumbling of what little order the streets had. Steve White was 34 when he brought Daryl Adams to life. His acting journey began way back in 1976 with Revenge of the Cheerleaders. You might also remember him from tiny but memorable roles in Coming to America and Harlem Nights. Steve became a regular in Spike Lee's world, popping up in Do the Right Thing, Mo Better Blues, Malcolm X, and Get on the Bus. He also left his mark on TV with appearances in Living Single, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, In the House, and Martin. Steve White is now 64, and his last on-screen role came in the 2013 film Playing for Love. But for fans of clockers, Steve White will forever be Daryl Adams, the man whose smile could light up a block, but couldn't stop a bullet. And then we have Victor, played by the incredibly talented Isaiah Washington. Victor was Strike's younger brother, but don't get it twisted, he was nothing like Ronald. While Strike was out chasing the dope dealer dream, Victor was all about doing things the right way. He was a cool, grounded man with a wife and 2 young boys who called him Daddy. Victor worked long hours for little pay, but he stayed solid. No criminal record, no dirt. He was determined to escape the grip of the projects and give his family a better life. Even when clockers came sniffing around his job trying to move product, he stood firm. No deals, no shortcuts. But blood runs deep. And when Strike came to him desperate and scared about the job Rodney handed him to handle Daryl Adams, Victor stepped up. Maybe it was brotherly love, maybe it was pressure. Either way, Victor, the clean one, took the fall. He did the job. And that's what made it so wild. Even the detectives couldn't believe it. This was a guy with no priors, no dirt, no reason. But that's the power of loyalty and manipulation. Isaiah Washington was 32 when he gave us this layered performance. His career kicked off in 1991 with Strictly Business. Before Clockers, he'd already starred in the 1993 film Strapped and had worked with Spike Lee in Crooklyn. They'd go on to team up again for Girl 6 and Get on the Bus. Isaiah didn't stop there. He delivered standout roles in Dead Presidents, Love Jones, Bulworth, and Romeo Must Die. But his big break came in 2005 when he joined Grey's Anatomy as Dr. Preston Burke. Unfortunately, things got rocky and he was let go due to some off-screen issues. But that's a convo for another day. Now 61, Isaiah Washington is still that dude. Despite the ups and downs, one thing remains. The man can act. He continues to star in films and TV shows, and for those who remember Clockers, he'll always be Victor, the good brother who crossed the line for family. Up next, we've got Rocco Klein, played by the legendary Harvey Keitel. Rocco is a seasoned, streetwise homicide detective working the gritty streets of Brooklyn. But don't confuse him with your average badge-wearing tough guy. Rocco's got a real moral compass and sharp instincts, especially when things just don't sit right. When Daryl Adams ends up dead, Rocco steps in to take the case. On paper, it looks simple. Victor, Strike's squeaky clean brother, confesses. Case closed, right? Not for Rocco. He's not buying it. Something about that confession doesn't feel right, and he can't let it go. So he sets off on a quiet, relentless mission to uncover the real story behind Daryl's death. And let me tell you, Rocco had a way of popping up everywhere. Strike would be mid-dump or chilling on the benches, and boom, Rocco appears out of nowhere. That man stayed in Strike's head, renting space, messing with his psychology, making him second-guess everything. Harvey Keitel was 56 when he brought Rocco to life, but by then, he was already a veteran of the game. His film journey started way back in the late 60s, with movies like Reflections in a Golden Eye and Who's That Knocking at My Door? Over the years, he became known for playing tough guys, law enforcers, and characters with a complex edge, and Rocco fit that mold perfectly. Today, Keitel is 85 and still pushing forward. Still tough, still respected, and still a major force in Hollywood. We salute him and wish him nothing but good health. For fans of Clockers, Harvey Keitel as Rocco Klein will always be the detective who wouldn't let go, especially when the truth was buried under Brooklyn concrete. Standing side by side with Rocco was Larry Mazzilli, played by John Terturo, a cop who was practically Rocco's opposite in every way. While Rocco had a keen eye for detail and a sense of justice, Larry, he was all about speed, quick to close cases, not so quick to ask questions. If it looked good on paper, that was good enough for him. No digging deeper, no second guessing. He didn't see the point of peeling back layers, especially if it involved young black men from the projects. And it didn't stop there. Larry was corrupt to the core. As the film unfolds, we come to find out he wasn't just looking the other way when it came to the drug game. He was in on it. Word is, he knew all about Rodney's operations, and would even tip him off if something was about to go down, like a bust or police sweep. Dirty hands and clean gloves. There's also this uncomfortable air about him. Larry had a tendency to brush off violence in the black community, like it didn't deserve the same level of investigation. If it was blacks effing up blacks, he didn't see the need to go deep. That mindset spoke volumes about how Larry saw the world. John Terturo was 38 when he took on this role. By then, he had already made waves in the industry with his breakthrough in Five Corners back in 1987. He was no stranger to working with Spike Lee either, having starred in Do the Right Thing, 1989, Mo Better Blues, 1990, and Jungle Fever, 1991. That working relationship helped shape him not just as an actor, but as a filmmaker. Terturo has often credited Spike Lee with teaching him a lot about storytelling, character, and the craft of cinema. Now 68, John Terturo is still going strong in Hollywood. He's picked up awards, respect, and fans from all over the world. And since 1988, he's been living in Park Slope in Brooklyn, staying close to the streets where stories like Clockers come to life. Let's move on to Tyrone, better known as Shorty, played by Peewee Love. Now Shorty was one of those kids from the block who was always hanging around the Clockers. And honestly, he had no business being out there. He should have been in school, playing ball, or doing anything else that a kid his age should be doing. But the projects? They don't care how old you are. They'll pull you in young, and once you're in, it's hard to get out. Shorty looked up to Strike like he was his big brother, or even his pops. And Strike? He had real love for Shorty. You could tell he wanted something better for the kid. But the streets were loud, and the guidance was limited. Now here's the wild part. Shorty was always getting picked on by Errol. And man, let's be real, why is a grown-ass man beefing with a little kid? It made you uneasy, like you just knew something bad could happen at any moment. Shorty had a mama who didn't play. She had that short fuse, and we'll talk about her in just a bit. But for now, let's stick with Peewee Love. He'd been acting since 1985, and Spike Lee clearly saw something in him. Peewee popped up in other Spike joints like Crooklyn and Malcolm X, and he also had a role in the 1994 film Radio Inside. Now, Peewee hasn't been active on the acting scene for a while, but we still hold out hope that he might bounce back one day. Based on estimates, he was probably around 12 when Clockers dropped, which would put him at about 42 now. These days, Peewee keeps the hustle going in real life, working as a security guard in the Bronx, and even doing some club promotion on the side. We wish him nothing but good health and success. Because for fans of Clockers, he'll always be Shorty. A young blood whose innocence got snatched way too early. Up next is Iris Jeter, played by the powerhouse Regina Taylor, a woman you did not want to mess with. Iris was Shorty's mama, and she carried that fierce energy of a mother who's been through the fire and won't let the streets swallow her child without a fight. You remember that scene when Strike took Shorty to get his hair shaved? Strike had a shaved head himself, so maybe he thought he was giving Shorty a fresh start. But Iris wasn't having it. That moment lit a fire in her because deep down, she knew what that haircut symbolized. It wasn't just a style, it was a step closer to the Clocker lifestyle. And the Clockers? They were always perched on those benches, whispering lies to kids like Shorty and pulling them into that trap. Her anger wasn't just at Strike, it was at the whole crew. She told those knuckleheads loud and clear, "None of y'all are playing daddy to my son." Especially not Strike. Iris had a vision of who she wanted as a role model for Shorty, and that man was Andre. But we'll get to him later. Now, let's give flowers to Regina Taylor. She was 35 at the time she brought Iris Jeter to life, and her filmography is stacked with performances across both film and television. She even won a Golden Globe for her powerful role in the TV series I'll Fly Away, a show that proved just how dynamic she could be. Today, Regina is 64 and still doing her thing on screen, continuing to shine and deliver roles with depth and grace. But for Clockers fans, she'll always be remembered as Shorty's mama, a woman who didn't raise her voice often, but when she did, the whole block listened. Let's talk about Andre, played by the legendary Keith David. Now this was the kind of man every young kid on the block needed. Andre was a cop, but more than that, he was from the block. He lived right there in the same projects as Strike, so he wasn't some outsider barking orders. He understood the struggle firsthand. Andre was tall, solid, and built like someone you just didn't want to cross. But what made him special wasn't just his presence, it was his heart. There was this side of him I really respected. The way he tried to steer the Clockers away from that street life. He'd roll up on them and drop truth bombs, like when he straight up told them he was the one who had to notify Daryl Adams' parents about their son's death. And then he looked those young dudes in the eye and said, "I don't want to be doing that for y'all next." That hit deep. You could tell he actually cared. He wasn't just policing, he was mentoring. He saw where this life was headed, and he wanted them to leave it behind while they still had a chance. Keith David brought Andre to life with that powerful mix of authority and empathy. He was just 27 when Clockers premiered, but he was already seasoned, having appeared in over 10 films. His debut was back in 1979 in Disco Godfather, and from there, he built one of the most impressive resumes in the game. Some of my personal favorites? Gotta be Dead Presidents and Requiem for a Dream. But honestly, his filmography is stacked with over 50 credits. It would take all day to list them. Today, Keith David is 68, still thriving, still delivering with that unmistakable voice and presence. He continues to enjoy life alongside his wife, Dione Lee Williams, and in Clockers, he'll always be remembered as Andre, the real one from the block who wore a badge, but carried a whole lot of heart. Now let's talk about a character that probably riles up a lot of folks. Errol Barnes, played by the late Thomas Jefferson Bird. Errol wasn't just your typical street dealer. He was deep in it, tied to Rodney not through loyalty, but blackmail. Their history ran long, but it was messy. Way back, Errol had Rodney smoke someone for him. It was Rodney's first kill. That move? It set the blueprint. Years later, Rodney used that same twisted tactic on Strike. Have the young blood do your dirty work, then hold it over him forever. That's how the game worked. Get him young, get him trapped. Errol had a menacing vibe. You could feel it every time he stepped into a scene. He was intimidating, always looming, always threatening. But what made his story even heavier was that he used to be someone. Back in the day, Errol was a big guy with real dreams. He actually wanted to be an accountant. But life in the projects took a dark turn. He got caught up, ended up sharing needles, and contracted AIDS. You could see the bitterness eat at him. He knew the disease was his death sentence. He hated what he'd become. But in a twist of fate, he didn't go out the way he expected. It wasn't the disease that took him. It was Shorty, the kid he used to bully, the one he underestimated. Poetic justice in the harshest way. Thomas Jefferson Bard was 45 when he brought Errol to life. And Clockers marked his debut film role. And man, he nailed it. You felt everything. His menace, his regret, his unraveling. He went on to appear in other Spike Lee joints like Girl 6 and Get on the Bus, and also showed up in Set It Off and Bulworth. The man had range. Sadly, in 2020, Thomas Jefferson Bird was tragically murdered in Atlanta. He was 70 years old. His killer, a 30-year-old man named Antonio Demetrius Rhines, was later arrested for the crime. It was a devastating loss for the arts and for those who admired his craft. May Thomas Jefferson Bird rest in peace. He gave us one hell of a performance as Errol, a character you couldn't forget, no matter how much you wanted to. Up next, we got Sharon, played by the stunning Lisa Arendelle. And oh my, this woman was beautiful. But she wasn't just eye candy. Sharon was Victor's wife, a strong black woman who was doing her best to hold her household down. She was tired of seeing her man grind through 65-hour work weeks, and she let him know. That pressure she put on Victor? Some would say it might have gotten to him. And yes, it did get to him, and maybe it pushed him to commit the crime. A crime we all know Victor did it to protect his brother Strike, who was being pressured by Rodney. But when Victor went to prison, Sharon was devastated. Left behind to raise 2 kids on her own, life got real fast. Even Strike, who stayed dodging responsibility, stepped up in a way. He handed Sharon $5,000 to give to his own mom so they could help get Victor out on bail. It was messy, but it showed how much Sharon was caught in the middle of everyone else's choices. As for Lisa Arendelle, her acting career kicked off in 1991, and Clockers was her 4th film. She was 26 years old at the time, already bringing depth and grace to the screen. After Clockers, she kept it going, starring in films like Disappearing Acts, 2000, Big Mama's House 2, and a bunch of indie gems that showed her versatility. On TV, she's been everywhere, guest starring in shows like In the House, The Practice, The Steve Harvey Show, Saints and Sinners, Elementary, Our Kind of People, and of course the forever-running Law and Order. She always came through with elegance and strength in every role. Lisa Arendelle is now 56, still glowing, and currently living in New York City with her 2 kids. No matter what role she plays, she'll always be remembered as that woman who gave the character of Sharon a beautiful, heartfelt core. Let's talk about the man behind Clockers, the one and only Spike Lee. Not only did he direct this powerful film, but he also popped up on screen as a bystander named Chucky. We first meet Chucky at the crime scene of Daryl Adams, standing around like a curious neighbor who might have seen something, but he's not saying a word. When Rocco tries to interrogate him, Chucky plays it cool. Maybe he wanted some cash before talking, or maybe he didn't know a damn thing. Either way, he wasn't about to snitch. Fast forward to the final crime scene, when the young clocker Scientific gets gunned down, and there's Chucky again. This time, when Rocco asks what happened, all he says is, "That kid Scientific got shot up." Still vague. Still Chucky. Spike Lee was 38 years old when he made Clockers, but he was already a legend in the making. He kicked off his directorial journey in 1986 with She's Gotta Have It, and the hits kept coming. School Days, 1988, Do the Right Thing, 1989, Mo Better Blues, 1990, Jungle Fever, 1991, Malcolm X, 1992, Crooklyn, 1994, Clockers, 1995, 25th Hour, 2002, Inside Man, 2006, Chirac, 2015, Black Klansman, 2018, and Da 5 Bloods, 2020. That's a legacy built on truth, culture, and storytelling that hits the soul. Spike doesn't just stay behind the camera either. He's made cameos in 11 of his films, proving he's always down to be part of the story he's telling. Now, at 68 years old, Spike Lee is a straight-up blessing to the world of film. He's been honored with countless awards, including the prestigious Academy Award, an Oscar well-deserved. Whether he's calling out injustice or putting the spotlight on voices we need to hear, Spike Lee will always be a cornerstone of cinema. Up next, we've got Jojo, played by the ever-intense Michael Imperioli. Jojo was a hard-nosed NYPD detective who wasn't about to let any corner kid or drug dealer slip through the cracks, especially not the Clockers. He was determined to bring justice, but the one thing he didn't have was solid evidence to take down the real kingpin, Rodney. Jojo had a habit of shaking up the young guys, literally. In one scene, he corners a group of teens with drugs in their car and goes off. Classic Jojo. If he got a handle on you, he wasn't letting go. Even Strike and Rodney had to admit, Jojo wasn't someone you wanted sniffing around your business. Michael Imperioli was 29 years old at the time Clockers dropped, but he'd already been putting in work. He had previously collaborated with Spike Lee on Jungle Fever and Malcolm X, showing that he could move through heavy roles with ease. After Clockers, he kept climbing. He appeared in Dead Presidents, Disappearing Acts, and plenty of other strong films, but his true breakout came on television when he played Christopher Moltisanti on The Sopranos. That role didn't just put him on the map, it carved his name into TV history. Now 59, Michael Imperioli has a filmography so deep it'd take a while to even scratch the surface. He continues to act, write, and direct, and through it all, he remains grounded. He's married to Victoria Klebowski, and together they have 3 children. Wishing Michael all the best, he'll always be remembered as Jojo, the detective who brought the heat every time he showed up. Next up, we have Gloria, played by the late Frances Foster. Gloria was the mother of Strike and Victor, but let's be real, Victor was her favorite. She was always defending him, no matter what, and you could tell she had a soft spot for her good son. Deep down, though, she knew Victor was the one who actually killed Daryl Adams. When the detectives show up at her place, Gloria quickly moves to protect Victor's name, saying if he did anything, it had to be in self-defense. Meanwhile, she wasn't shy about throwing shade on Strike, painting him to the detectives as a runaway, someone who didn't even stay in her home. The relationship between Gloria and Strike was tense, full of distance and disappointment. But in the end, the truth comes out. She confesses that it was Victor who pulled the trigger. Frances Foster was 71 years old when Clockers was released, and her presence in the film carried real weight. But her talents didn't stop at the screen. She was also an award-winning stage director, blazing trails throughout her career. And get this, in 1955, she became the first African-American to appear in a nationally broadcast television commercial. A true pioneer. She also appeared in other Spike Lee joints, including Malcolm X and Crooklyn, always bringing that quiet strength and depth to every role. Sadly, Frances Foster passed away in 1997 at the age of 73 due to cerebral hemorrhage. But she left behind a legacy that lives on in every powerful performance she gave. Gone, but never forgotten. And then we have Jesus, played by Paul Calderon. Jesus was the owner of the food joint where Victor worked, and from what we saw, he was a boss who actually cared about his employees. When the detectives Rocco and Larry come knocking with questions about Victor, Jesus stands firm. He tells them Victor was a good man, dedicated, hardworking, and someone who wanted to keep the joint clean, not a hangout for clockers and their shady business. Jesus clearly respected Victor and appreciated that he wasn't trying to bring the streets into the kitchen. Paul Calderon was 36 years old at the time Clockers came out, and he was already a seasoned actor by then. He'd been active since the 80s, showing up in gritty, unforgettable roles. Some of his standout early work includes Band of the Hand, 1986, Sticky Fingers, 1988, King of New York, 1990, and of course, the iconic Pulp Fiction, 1994. On television, he made appearances in shows like New York Undercover, and popped up in a ton of other guest roles over the years. Now at 66 years old, Paul Calderon is still doing his thing in the industry, bringing that same raw energy and authenticity to every role he takes on. Up next is Scientific, played by Sticky Fingers. Scientific was one of the clockers who sat on the benches working for the big boss, Rodney, and this dude was straight up aggressive, volatile, and constantly trying to prove himself, especially when it came to his back and forths with Strike. Once Rodney gets locked up, Scientific immediately suspects Strike of being the snitch. He calls him out in front of everyone, accuses him, and the two end up in a full-on bust-up. Scientific's hot-headed nature was his biggest weakness, and by the end of the film, it leads to his tragic demise. Sticky Fingers, whose real name is Kirk Jones, was just 22 years old at the time of Clockers. He had already made his acting debut in 1993 in the award-winning HBO film Strapped. But acting is just one part of his resume. He's also a rapper, record producer, and a founding member of the multi-platinum hardcore rap group Onyx, known for their raw energy and gritty sound. Now 51 years old, Sticky Fingers has built an impressive career, appearing in over 80 films and TV shows. Some of his standout film credits include In Too Deep, Lockdown, Doing Hard Time, and Breaking Point. but for a lot of fans, he's probably best remembered for his role as Tyrone in Next Friday. Sticky Fingers is still very much active in the entertainment game, continuing to make his mark both on screen and in music. See this guy right here? He was also another clocker from the benches, and his name was Go, played by Fredro Starr. Unlike his hot-headed crewmate Scientific, Go was more of a quiet, laid-back guy who kept to himself and pushed ounces low-key. He never got into beef, never clashed with the crew, and somehow always managed to stay off the radar when it came to police trouble. Fredro Starr, whose real name is Fred Lee Scruggs Jr., was 24 years old at the time Clockers dropped. And just like his co-star and real-life cousin, Kirk Jones, Fredro had already made his mark in the film world, debuting in the 1993 HBO film Strapped. Aside from movies, Fredro's been all over TV too. He had memorable roles in shows like Moesha, In the House, and NYPD Blue, just to name a few. Today, Fredro Starr is 54 years old, and yes, Sticky Fingers, real name Kirk Jones, is his real-life cousin, adding even more depth to their shared scenes in Clockers. Fredro is married and enjoying life with his wife and 3 children. A true family man who's still keeping it cool, just like Go. And that's a wrap on our look back at Clockers, a film that doesn't just tell a story, but forces us to confront the tough realities of life and choices. From its unforgettable performances to its thought-provoking themes, it's a true Spike Lee classic. Which cast member's journey left you speechless? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more throwback insights into your favorite films. Until next time, this has been Movie Bites. Thanks for watching.